Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3 of MakeCode Arcade. I'm super glad you could join us today. My name is Corey, and with me today I have Amanda.
Hi everyone.
And in the background we have Neve, Kaylin, and Richard to answer any questions that you might have. Now, before we get started, I'm going to go through two things with you. The first one is, if you're new this week, welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm going to show you how you can access last week and the week before's webinars so you can catch up on the code that we're going to be doing today. The second thing I'm going to go through with you is that if you were here last week and you didn't get a chance to save your game, or you saved it and you don't know where it's saved to, I'm going to show you how you can access that code now. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go onto our internet browser, and we're going to type in aka.ms /HomeSpace Files. So that's aka.ms /HomeSpace Files. And once you're there, you'll see this page. And this is our wakelet. And on our wakelet, we have a playlist called DreamSpace HomeSpace Series YouTube. And here is where you can access all of our previous webinars. Okay, so if you want to go back and watch week 1 and week 2, you're going to look for Arcade Lesson 1 and Arcade Lesson 2. Okay, and then come back to us and watch this one. So if you were here last week and you didn't get a chance to save your game, you're going to access the same wakelet at the same address. And you're just going to scroll down a little bit further until you see Arcade Web 2. Okay, so you're going to click on Arcade Web 2, and this is last week's completed game, and it's going to bring you to a OneDrive. And once you're in here, you can see your game, and it looks like a photo, and it saves like a photo. But when we go to upload that, it actually uploads as code. Okay, so go ahead and download that game. And what I like to do is I like to press the button beside save, and I like to save it as something, because then I know where I saved it to. So here you can see I'm saving it to my desktop, and I'm going to save it over Arcade Web 2. And you can just go ahead and do the same if you haven't got your game. Once that's done, let's click back into our arcade.makecode.com platform. So arcade.makecode.com. And now we're on our homepage that we're used to seeing. Now, two things here. If your game saved automatically, you will see it in a square here, and it will be whatever you called it. But if it's not there, don't worry, because I've just showed you how you can access it. So let's go to import. Let's go to import from file and browse our computer. Now, remember, I saved it to my desktop and I called it Arcade Web 2. So let's open it and go ahead. And it's loading, and it's going to come up with all the code that I done last week. And we done so much code, so well done, everyone. Okay, now I set you 2 home challenges. Your first home challenge was to create a flip book. And you might be thinking, why did I have to create that flip book? But the reason for that is because in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be learning about animations and how animations can be used with arrays and lists in coding. Okay, so it's going to be really, really fun and engaging. So I'm excited to learn about the different kind of animations you created with your real life flip book. The second thing I asked you to do for your home challenge was discover the music block. So if I come over here, I have this category called music. So let's delve into there and see what it has. I have sounds, and underneath the word sounds, I have play sound bidding. Okay, now I need to think carefully here, because when do I want music in my game? Well, I personally think I would like some kind of sound when I catch the seaweed. So I'm going to take out play sound, and I need to place that in my overlap. Okay, so when my player overlaps my seaweed, that's when I want my sound to play. So let's take this out, and I need to search through all this code that we done. And I think this is it here. Let me just double check. If the player overlaps with the food, well then play sound bidding. Now you're probably wondering, what is bidding? Pause this webinar now and have a listen to all the different sounds that you have. So if I click this drop down arrow, I have all these kind of gaming options. My favorite one is Magic Wand. So if you want to pop me on pause and have a listen to them and decide what one you want. But remember, you don't only have to have a sound when you catch the food. You can have a sound when the enemy catches you, and maybe it's power down or pew pew. There's loads of different options. So you go there and you have a play around with that for a couple of minutes and then unpause me and we'll continue on. One thing that I really mentioned last week, and I kept saying it's going to be so important next week, is tile maps. Okay, so I'm going to get started on my tile map now. So we know that our tile map is in our start menu up here. So let's click into the blue box and let's open back up our tile map. Now, our tile map or our simulator screen is 16 width by 16 height, okay? And that you can see that down here. But in my game, I want it to be narrow and I want it to be really long. So let's change the ratio. Let's change 16 width to 14. If I click out here, I can see my screen got a little bit smaller. And let's change the length of our game or the height of our game to 24 and click back out. Now, pop me on pause there if you want a minute to catch up. So we can see here now, we have our blue screen, but again, we don't have anything down here. So let's go back over to our bucket. And where did we find this blue tile? Well, we found it in My Tiles because we created it last week. So click on the bucket, click on My Tiles, and click on the blue square, and just do what you're used to doing now. Fill it in. But I want to make this look like an underwater game. So we have our water, but let's introduce something else, okay? So I'm going to go into gallery. And I'm going to not go into forest because that's not what my game is about. But remember, if you're creating your own game at home, you have a look at whatever tile you want and you be as creative as you want with your tile map. But forest doesn't suit me. So I'm going to go into aquatic and I can see a lovely tile of coral here. So I'm going to take this out, but I have to be very, very careful here because look at what I'm on. I'm on the bucket. So if I go and press this square now, my whole screen is going to be full of coral, okay? So I want to make sure that when I click my tile map, I go back to my pencil. And now I can draw some coral in my game. And there we go. Now I'm going to do this all the way down.
And Corey, is this just to add like another design feature to the game, or why are we adding the coral?
That's actually a really good question. So we are actually adding the coral to be an obstacle. So something that Nemo or something that your player has to avoid. Because I'm going to write a line of code in a couple of minutes that's going to make sure that when Nemo overlaps with the coral, Nemo's to go back to the start or something like that.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, so we have our obstacles, but now I want some sort of goal at the end. So I am going to go into gallery again. And remember, pop me on pause if you want to have a look at some more tile maps, or if you want to create your own tile for the obstacle, that'd be really cool. So I'm going to pop into gallery and I'm going to go into miscellaneous. And there's a nice tile in here that I like for my underwater theme. And it's this little like water. And I think that for me in this game, that's going to represent like the big ocean that Nemo's trying to get back out into. So I'm going to put this at the very end of my tile map because I want Nemo to have to go through all of this to get to the end. So once you have your tile map done and you're happy with it, and the ratio is 14 by 24, let's press done. And let's see our game. Now, little bit of a problem here because Nemo is already on the coral. So Amanda, do you know if there's a way that I can make that not happen?
Well, I think maybe if we think about like the coordinates, is there a way of us setting Nemo to be in a certain position on the screen using our coordinates that we looked at before?
That is a really good idea because remember, we're experts now at the X and Y axis. We know that Nemo is placed on the screen using X and Y. And if that's not where I want Nemo to start, well, let's just change Nemo's position. So Nemo is my sprite. So let's pop into sprites. And let's take out the second block of code to set my sprite position to XY. Let's take this out and put it in our on start block. You can just put it in at the end. Now, we know now that that is not what's supposed to happen. That's a bug. We want to set Nemo or your player's sprite position to be somewhere on X and somewhere on Y. And what I love about Arcade is this. Watch. If I go into X, a graph pops up. So I can say, okay, let me drag across this little circle and let me decide where Nemo is going to be on X. And I think that there's nice, 72. But when I click into Y now, I can see if I drag this, wherever the two lines meet at that intersection there is where Nemo is going to be. So I like there. So I like 72 on X and 11 on Y. And let's see if that works. Because remember, it's really important to test your code. Perfect. I really like it. But we do have a slight problem. I am after creating this whole tile map, made a goal, and I can't even see it. Okay. So I want something that's going to show me or follow my tile map. I'm going to go into scene here. And don't forget to pause me if you want to catch up. So I'm going to go into scene and I'm going to look for a block of code that tells my tile map or something like that to follow my sprite because I want it to follow Nemo as they move. So I'm going to scroll into scene and down the very bottom, there might be a code that can help me there. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I think there's one that's jumping out at me there, Corey. It says camera follow sprite. So does that mean that it will follow Nemo?
Very good. Yes. So if I bring out camera follow sprite, that means that the camera is going to follow Nemo wherever they move. So let's take it out and try it and see what happens here. So let's take out camera follow sprite and again, put it into your on start block. And I want my sprite to change to Nemo. And now let's see what happens. Hopefully I can get away from these sharks. Now you can see that the camera is following me. And I can see this lovely tile map that I'm after drawing out. And I can get to the end. Now we haven't written the lines of code yet for the end. We'll be doing that later on. But I think it's a little bit too easy. I want my game to be a little bit harder. So I want to write a line of code now that says, if Nemo touches off that coral, they have to go back to the start. Okay. And that's an overlap with tile maps. Okay. So we're really, really used to using an overlap with our sprites. But now our coral is the tile map. And we're saying if Nemo overlaps with the tile map, something's going to happen. And Amanda, where do we usually find our tile maps?
Normally we go into scene.
Exactly. So let's go into scene and let's scroll down until we see this here. On sprite of kind player overlaps tile. Very similar to the one that you're used to seeing. This one is just with tile maps. And it's a new block of code. Okay, so it might take a second to find. So make sure you pause me. Now, on sprite of kind player overlaps with tile map. Let's bring this out. And I'm just going to move all my code over. We have so much, there's barely any room. And I want to say if my player, perfect, overlaps with blank tile. No. Let's click on our best friend, the arrow. And let's change that to our coral tile. And I want to say if Nemo overlaps with the coral, we need to go back to the start. But we've already wrote that line of code a couple of minutes ago. So remember we done this here, set Nemo's position, and that's our starting line. let's click on that block of code so it highlights yellow, and then right-click, and you'll see the word duplicate. And duplicate just means copy that code. Now, if I bring this down, I can now say, when Nemo overlaps with the coral, go back to the start. So I'm making the game harder. And there you go. You can see Nemo's going back to the start. So imagine I was all the way down here, back to the start. Okay? So we have our game a little bit more interactive now. So we are going to introduce something else, okay? Because Nemo has to keep going back to the start. Nemo keeps losing points. Let's introduce a projectile. Okay, so Amanda is going to go through with you now. What exactly is a projectile and how can we use them in this game to our advantage?
Perfect. Yeah, so let's have a look at this. I'm just going to pick up where Corey has left off now, and we'll have a look. So as Corey mentioned there, the word projectiles, really interesting word, and sometimes people wonder what is a projectile. Well, generally in a game, it's something that's moving across the screen, and generally it's targeted at something or an item or a sprite on the screen. So it's actually moving with a purpose. As Corey said, we want to maybe add something to our game now. So far, Nemo is encountering two obstacles. One, hitting the coral, which is going to bounce Nemo back to the start, or two, hitting off the shark, which remember actually takes away points from us. So how about we now give Nemo something to use like a projectile instead? So first of all, before we write that line of code, a projectile, we need to figure out when will we use the projectile. So on our controller, so if you look at our simulator on the screen, so far, all we've used are the directional arrows. We've just used our up and our down to move our sprite around the screen. But there are two other buttons on our simulator. There is an A button and a B button. The A button, I think, is what I'm going to use now. And it's funny because something like the simulator or something like a physical device that you might have that's taken information in from its environment, we tend to call them inputs. So they happen all the time in our computer programs. So in this case, it's going to be part of our controller. So I'm going to hop into the controller category. And you can see we have the second block in here underneath. It says on A button pressed. So when we press on A, what do we want it to do? So let's bring that one in. Okay, so we've made a decision that when we press A, we want Nemo to fire a projectile at the shark. So Corey, what do we think? What do we want to happen when our projectile hits the shark, do you think?
Well, when the projectile hits the shark, I think that it would be a really good idea for maybe Nemo to get some points because they're after hitting the shark. And also, I think it'd be a good idea to destroy that shark because it's not fair that then they get a second chance to come around and try catch it.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, we can do that. We can write those lines of code in. Brilliant. So we want to say when we press A, let's first of all get the projectile to fire. That's the first thing we need to do, isn't it? So let's go into our sprites category because it's Nemo that's firing this projectile. So of course, this is all related back to our sprites. So I'm going to hop into our sprites category. And if we move down the screen, we can see in the projectiles area. So again, feel free to pause to find this. In the sprites category, there is an area that says projectiles. And in there are two blocks of code. So the first one says set projectile to be this and from the side. So that kind of doesn't cover what we want. That just means that the projectile is going to start coming in from the side of the screen, but it's not actually coming from Nemo, which is what we want. But that's where our second block is going to come in handy. Set projectile to projectile. So again, we'll pick what we want from a sprite. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So let's grab that one and bring that in. So when we press A, we are going to, first of all, design what we want our projectile to be. So we're going to set it to be something. And we're used to seeing this box now. It's, it's how we design or how we choose something or edit something. Sometimes we can make it ourselves, which obviously, again, you can feel free to pause and do so. But I'm going to hop into the gallery and I'm going to go down to the very bottom. And in here, we have kind of what look like kind of rocks or something. So I'm going to use these. I'm going to click on this one. And when I have it there, I'm going to click on Done. So we've set our projectile to look like this from my sprite. So again, we have a bug here. We're used to seeing this. That's because we have no variable that is called my sprite. The player or the sprite we want this projectile to come from is Nemo. So let's click on the arrow, change it to Nemo. And then the very last bit of that code, what it says is with Vx, Vy. Now, this was discussed last week by Kaylin and Corey. They talked about velocity. So if you remember, velocity was when an item was moving with speed in a certain direction. So obviously our projectile is going to be moving at speed and we want to decide what direction do we want. So we can change this. You can feel free again to pause and play around with these numbers and keep testing and see what you think. I'm going to go with Vx of 50. So coming across velocity, across the x-axis at 50, but down by 20. So I'm going to go by 50 and by 20. And like I said, you can play with those numbers and then test it. So I'm going to test what mine looks like now. I'm going to come over to my game. My code is press A. So I'm going to press A and I can see I'm firing and I'm hitting the shark. But I'm after hitting the shark there and nothing happened. But as Corey said, there's a couple of things we could actually do here. So Corey, you mentioned giving us points maybe when we hit the shark. How many points are you thinking?
Well, I think I'm going to be very generous because I think this game is very hard. And I'm going to say,
so do I.
I want 2 points if I hit that shark.
Okay, 2 points if you hit the shark. I'm glad you said that, Corey, because I definitely find these games a bit harder too, as we know. So I think 2 points is definitely good. Okay, so let's think about this. Our projectile is firing and it's hitting the shark. So what is actually happening? If we think about the words we've been using in our program, we have a projectile overlapping with our shark, don't we? So we need to go get that overlap block before that we talked about, which was in our sprites category. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to go get my overlap block when a sprite overlaps with another sprite. So I'm going to bring that one in. And again, feel free to pause until you've caught up to where we are and then continue on. On sprite of kind player. Now, the kind that is overlapping with the enemy isn't a player, it's my projectile. So the kind or the type is different here. So I'm going to click on my arrow and I'm going to change that to projectile. So when the sprite of the kind projectile overlaps with the other sprite of kind, what do we think, Corey?
Enemy.
Enemy, absolutely. So we're going to go and change, click arrow, change to enemy. So what we're saying is when our sprite, our projectile, overlaps with our enemy, and now we can say what we wanted to do. So the first thing we wanted to do is obviously we want to gain points. So we're going to go into info, which remembers how we did our scores up to now. We've been adding scores, we've been setting our score and minusing scores. Well, I'm delighted to say now we can add some scores. We can gain some scores instead of losing them. So let's go in and change our score. And I agree with Corey, I'm going to be generous here, but obviously you guys can decide. Maybe you want to give yourself 3 points. Maybe you want to be really harsh and give yourself 1 point. This is up to you. We're going to go to 2. We think it's a good idea to give ourselves 2 points. And then the other thing I wanted to do is maybe actually get rid of the sprite. Corey mentioned that as well, which I think is a good idea. So the sprite that the projectile hits or overlaps with, let's actually just get rid of that off the screen then, because we're after hitting it. So again, this is all to do with our sprites. So we're going to go into the sprites category. And if we go down a little bit, there's an effects area. And it says in here, destroy my sprite. So we're going to go with that one. And actually, I might do that first. We might get rid of the sprite straight away before we give ourselves the points. Okay, now again, we have an error. So we need to think very carefully about this. This was something we encountered before lots of times, but specifically with something like an overlap, we need to be careful. What do we actually want to destroy? We want to destroy what the projectile has touched off. Okay, so the shark that the projectile is overlapped with, not just any shark. And if we change this, if we hit this arrow and we change it to the shark, then actually the newest shark will be destroyed, okay? Not the one we've actually hit necessarily. So how we overcome this last time, and if you think about it, was we said we want to destroy, yes, the other sprite of kind enemy. So it's this block we need. So we want to destroy the enemy we've just overlapped with. So we're going to grab this red other sprite block out of here, and we're going to let that pop in here. Okay, and we don't need that one anymore. So again, if you want to pause to make sure that you're in line here. And lastly, I don't want to just destroy it. I'm going to add a little effect. I'm going to hit that plus sign and I'm going to just say destroy it and give me some smiles when you destroy it for half a second, as well as giving me 2 points. So let's go and test this out. I'm going to go and refresh my game over here. I'm going to start moving. I'm going to start firing. See, can I get a few points there? After missing that one. As Corey will attest, I'm not the best at this game, so you'll have to bear with me. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Did you see that? So it destroyed the shark I just hit, and I gained 2 points up in the corner here. Brilliant. Okay. Not too bad. So at the moment, I'm playing my game. I'm able to hit A and fire out my projectiles to get rid of the sharks and gain myself some points. I can actually catch the seaweed still if I want as well to gain a point, remember. So, and I want to get to the finish line. Woohoo. Okay. Now, I got to the finish line, but nothing has actually happened. So we wanted something to happen when we hit the finish line. Corey, what do you think on this? What normally happens in a game when the player reaches the end or the finish line?
Well, usually it will say something like, woo, level up, or it will change the scenery. So you won't be under the sea anymore. You might be somewhere else.
Okay, cool. So we can do this, all right? We can definitely do this. What this is at the bottom is what Corey did at the very start. It's just a tile map. It's just a finish line that she put in at the end of her tile map. So we can now come up with a line of code that says that when Nemo touches off that section of the tile map, then we have ended our game, or we finished our game, and we can decide what we want that to look like. So tile maps, remember, okay, we're in the scene category. And yes, it is kind of an overlap, but it's an overlap with our tile map. So we're going to go find that one in the scene category. So I'm going to hop in here and I'm going to go down to where it says tiles. And in here, again, is the same block that Corey used earlier on sprite of kind player, overlaps, and we can decide on which tile map we want to overlap with. So we're going to bring that one out. And again, if you need to, feel free to pause and make sure that you're up to speed with where we're at right now, because we're aware that we're doing a lot of code right now. So if you do need to pause, feel free to do so. On sprite of kind player, overlaps, and I need to decide with what. So we're talking about right now, if Nemo reaches the finish line. So when Nemo reaches that section of the tile map, which was our water, our kind of ocean, as Corey explained it earlier. And now we can decide, well, what do we want it to do? What do we want to do when our player overlaps with the ocean? So I think that was a good idea, Corey, to have maybe some text flash up on the screen. So that's really cool, and we can do that. And how we do that is we hop into the game category. And in the game category, we have a splash block. So you might see that here, a splash block. So we're going to drag that one out. And I'm after moving up my screen, so I need to go back to where I was. Oh, down a little bit more. Okay, there we go. So we want to bring this in, right? So we're going to say splash. Now in here, you can see that we have an open area with inverted commas at either end. So that would you see that normally you would think of someone quoting someone or some, so it would normally involve some sort of text, wouldn't it? So this is called a string. So when we're doing computer programs, not just games, it could be other things as well, we use strings a lot, and they're alphanumeric, which means that in a string we can have letters, numbers, or symbols. So in here, that means we can say woohoo, because that's what Corey said, which we'll go with that one. And maybe an exclamation mark, because remember, we can have symbols as well. And then we'll say level up. So we're going to be leveling up when we get to that end line. Corey also mentioned something else there. So she mentioned that maybe when we get to the next level appears different on the screen. So maybe we're not in our ocean anymore. Maybe the next level involves a different animal on a different environment, in a different environment. So we want to say not just something's flashing on the screen, we want to see a completely new screen or a new tile map. So I can hear you shouting at home, where do we find tile maps? We can find it in scene. So let's go into scene. And we're going to go down here to our tiles area and say set tile map 2. And this is what we're going to be moving on to, which is really cool. Now, next week, we are going to really add to this whole idea of another level. So we're not going to go much further than this today, just to say that we can do this. But if you're thinking at home, oh my God, brilliant, we can add levels. We are going to show you much more about adding levels next week. Right now, I just want to see a new screen. So I'm going to go into set tile map 2, click on my empty box again. And like I said, maybe in the next level, Nemo's gone. Maybe we have a new animal as our player. And so maybe we're in something like a forest. So I'm going to keep with our forest here. I'm going to click on maybe this one. Yeah, I like the look of that. And I'm going to use my bucket to fill this up. Okay, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to click done. Okay, perfect. So our next line of code was when the player overlaps with the finish, we should see woohoo, level up, and then we should see a new tile map. Well, let's go and check this out. So I'm going to refresh and begin my game again. Wish me luck. I'm not the best at this thing. Actually, I meant to test. Hold on. If I hit this, Corey. Oh, I am bouncing back. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to hit A. I'm going to try catch some sharks here, get myself some points. Better not run into the sharks. I've only 1 point now. Okay. Oh. No. I'm really failing here, Corey, as usual. Oh, well, I'm getting some seaweed though. I'm after giving myself some points here with my seaweed. Yes, got that shark.
You got one.
Brilliant. Happy days. And I've reached the finish line. Okay, brilliant. There's my splash screen. Woohoo, level up. Brilliant. But no sign of my other thing, which was saying set tile map to be this. But what I want you to notice is on the screen here, it says there's a little A. And basically that's telling me click on the A button. So I'm going to click on the A button. And what that should do then is activate the fact that I'm onto my new tile map. Now my simulator has gone a bit mad, I think, has it? Oh, there we go. Brilliant. So there's my new tile map. Okay, fantastic. Woo. Now, before we finish up, I think maybe we can make this game slightly more exciting, right? So, Corey, any ideas? One other thing maybe we can add before we wrap up to make the game a little bit more exciting?
I think we should add a countdown, because then Nemo is against the clock to try and get to that finish line.
Okay, which is going to put me, as you may have seen there playing the game, under serious pressure because I'm not the quickest. I'm definitely not the best at this. Okay, countdown sounds really familiar to me. I've seen that before, and maybe you've seen it before as well at home. It's in the info category. So I'm going to go into info. So in info, remember, is where we've been looking at our scores. There's also lives, which maybe some of you have played around with. We'll look at that as well. But in here, there's also an area that says countdown. So we are going to go and we are going to say start countdown. So I'm going to bring that one in. Now it makes sense for the countdown to begin at the start, doesn't it? So it should start counting down the minute our game begins. So we're going to have to bring this block up our screen to our on start area. Sorry now. So I'm going to give a little sec to get to the top. Bring my block up. All this code, Corey, that we've done. Yeah,
I know, it just goes to show, doesn't it?
So much code. So well done for everyone keeping up with this. So start countdown. Now 10 seconds, not a chance. Am I going to get there in 10 seconds? Okay, so I'm going to change this. I am going to be super generous to myself. I know Corey could probably do it in 20 seconds. I'm going to give myself a minute, 60 seconds to get to the end. Okay, so start countdown. Obviously at home, feel free to change this to whatever you think you want to challenge maybe yourself to, or even somebody else in your house with. Okay, so start countdown 60 seconds. Okay, let's try this. So what we should see now on our screen is we should see our countdown. We should see obviously our scores up in the top right corner. We should be able to fire our projectiles. We should be able to go down through our tile map, reach the end, and get to the next level. So let's see, does that all work? Does that all come together now? So I'm going to refresh, go back to the beginning. Okay, there's my countdown clock. I can see that. Okay, brilliant. My simulator is flashing a bit, so apologies. Oh, there we go. I'm very proud of myself there, Corey, on that one. Evaded.
That was very good, I have to say.
You might have noticed at home, I've made my tile map really easy. Okay, brilliant. Got to the end. it's telling me you're leveling up, click on A into my next tile map. Okay, now next week, as I said, that whole level up idea, we're going to completely extend on that. But well done for getting to where we got to now. If you need to pause, rewind, go back through and check your little blocks of code, please do so. But what Corey's going to do now is just kind of recap over those key little bits that we've learned and kind of go through the next home challenge.
Okay, brilliant. Well done, everyone. That was absolutely fantastic. We're really getting super far with that game. Okay, so what did we learn today? So we covered tile maps again. Okay, so I know last week we touched on them, but today we've really seen how important they are in an actual video game and how often they're used. We also covered strings, which Amanda said are alphanumeric, and they also have symbols. So it's just another way of saying it's a word, and they are used across every single coding platform. We looked at projectiles, so that's usually an item that is aimed at hitting something as it moves across the screen. And the last thing we looked at was input. So that's when a program takes information from its environment. So the input you used was button A, and you use that for your projectile. So what is your home challenge for this week? Can you use another input on the simulator to make your game unique to you? So for example, we use button A to make a projectile, but now it's your turn to make something. So you use on button B and see what you can come up with. Be as creative as you want. And don't forget to save your game. So now for the questions and answers. And there's a couple of people wondering, is this on next week? And yeah, of course, come back to us next Wednesday at the same time, and we're going to be developing our game out further with some more levels. Next week is going to be the last week that we work on our under the water game, and then the week after that we are going to be going into another new game. Okay.
Brilliant.
So we have loads of webinars coming up for you with Arcade.
And Corey, there's another question. There's actually two questions here that I picked out that might help people at home actually, or people might be thinking the same thing. And one of them was, Nemo is always facing one direction. And is there a way maybe of getting Nemo to flip around and face a different direction?
Yes, there is. Okay. And that's really, really advanced how we get Nemo to do that. So that's going to be in maybe 2 weeks time. In our new game, we're going to get the sprite to flip horizontally with wherever they're sitting on the AY axis. So we're going to be using AY axis. We're going to be using less than and greater than. So as I said, it's a little bit more advanced. So it's going to take us a couple of more weeks to get there, but we will get there.
Okay, cool. And then another one is, someone's very excited here about the levels idea. And I get it, because I was so excited when I seen we could do the levels as well. So what exactly is that going to involve? We're going to really touch on that properly next week though, aren't we?
Yeah, so this week Amanda was just showing you that levels is possible. Okay, but next week we're actually going to look at design in a whole new level. And then that means that you're going to be left with the knowledge and the skills that if you want to make 10 levels in your game, you can make 10 levels in your game. We're just going to show you how to make one and how that you can make new sprites in that level. And it's going to involve a lot of conditional statements. Remember, we touched on them. So it's going to be really, really fun. And I just had a look through there at the Q&A, and I was looking at some of the games that you're after coming up with, and they sound absolutely brilliant. Planes in the sky, and people have ghosts and stuff. So I'm really glad that you're taking the time to create your own sprites and put your own spin on this game. So well done. So thanks a million, everyone. And if you want to access any of the resources or the home challenges, make sure that you click onto the link on the screen now, aka.ms/HomeSpace Files.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.